Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the third event in our Practical AI event series. My name is John Lazar, and I'm the president of the Royal Academy of Engineering. And it's my great pleasure to be hosting this series of online fireside chats where I speak to AI innovators and adopters to get under the skin of what it takes to responsibly integrate AI into everyday infrastructure and services to improve people's lives. A year ago, the government launched the AI Opportunities Action Plan, a strategic roadmap designed to accelerate AI adoption, enhance infrastructure, and support talent development. Since then, the government also published its 10-year health plan, which sets out a vision to make the health and care system fit for the future. At the heart of the plan are three long-term shifts: moving care closer to people's homes and communities, harnessing digital technology, especially AI, and shifting from a reactive model of treatment to a greater focus on prevention. Our discussion today sits right at that intersection, and we're going to explore both the technological and the human practicalities of making those shifts real. You're all hearing growing conversation about the risk that the AI bubble, so-called, could burst due to organizations experiencing limited return on investments in generative AI. And so we wanted to focus our Practical AI series on examples where AI has delivered measurably better outcomes, or to what extent it has been put into practice. There's no shortage of AI headlines, but adoption is where the work really happens. It's all about understanding the problem, building trust, getting the data right, designing safe operational processes, and supporting the people who will use the system day to day, making sure it works for them. So today we're focusing on one of the most sensitive, high-stakes settings for AI adoption: people's homes. We will explore how in-home sensing and care technology can support safer, independent living for people with care needs, including people living with dementia, and what it takes to do this in a way that preserves dignity and earns trust. I'm looking forward to hearing how AI can help care teams notice changes earlier, prioritize attention, and make better informed decisions while remaining honest about fallibility and uncertainty. We will also look at the enabling conditions, such as the care pathways, the workforce confidence, the governance and privacy posture, and the evidence required to justify scaling. As the Academy is currently looking at the future of neighborhood health for aging coastal communities, I'm particularly excited that we'll hear about what's happening in Medway, in the southeast of England. Before I get the ball rolling, we'd love to hear from you first. So please join our Slido by scanning the QR code or following the link in the comments to tell us how confident you are about using AI. And while you're voting, I'm going to introduce our panelists. And I'm delighted to be joined by the innovators who have delivered this really fantastic example of practical AI. Firstly, we have Councillor Teresa Murray, Deputy Leader of the Medway Council and Portfolio Holder for Health and Social Care. We're also joined by Rob Kennedy, Head of Business Development at Kyndi, running a team of care technologists and assessors, and Rhiannon, who manages the care technologist team at Kyndi. Kyndi is really interesting because it began as a council department responsible for telecare services before being converted into a local authority trading company. And we're going to hear what this means for embedding new technology into a day-to-day service delivery. And then one of Kyndi's portfolio products is Circadacare. And we're joined today by its CEO, Tallie, who's been instrumental in building it from the ground up. And now let's look at your votes. I'm going to pause for a second so we can show the results. This is great. We've got a pretty confident group of people. So I think that's really interesting. And it'll be interesting to see then how people respond to what we're going to hear about and what questions they ask. Now, while I know you're going to have lots of questions for the panelists, we want this to be a wider conversation. And I'm going to ask a few, but I'd like you to drop your questions into the comments and we'll try to get through as many as we possibly can. So I'm going to start by sort of setting the scene and starting right at the top. And I'd like to start with Teresa and maybe ask you, Teresa, to set the context for us. What were the pressures in health and social care in Medway that make this kind of preventative technology a priority for the council? And I'm really interested in also how you measure that. Like, how do you think about success? Is that fewer admissions, fewer care calls, fewer crises, more dignity? So how is that assessed from a council point of view?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. And John, I think it's all those things. We have set up with Kyndi as our wholly owned local authority company because we know that the demand for social care is changing and growing. We are talking, as you mentioned at the beginning, about older people and particularly those who are living with dementia, but also about younger people as well who have lifelong disabilities or people who may, for a short time following an accident or an illness, need adult social care. And for all of those people, it's very clear that their outcomes are better the longer they can stay in their own home, or for people who have been in hospital for one reason or another, the quicker they can get home and regain their independence, the more likely they are to stay well. So there's a health imperative and there's a social imperative as well. We want people to stay part of our community and live their best life as long as possible. And because people are living longer, the longer they can live well, the better they will enjoy that later life. And assistive technology is absolutely, for us, part of that picture.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for setting the scene there. I wanted to just ask specifically a follow-on question on dementia. Is that something that you see as a really big issue in the community, or is it just one of many?
I think it's fair to say it's one of many, and dementia is a spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
So, that there will be people who can live very well indeed once they recognize and develop strategies to cope with the way that things have changed for them. And then there's much more complex dementia, such as Alzheimer's disease. And for some of those people, their homes will end up being in a residential setting. So we're doing a number of things. We're building our own care home so that we can accommodate complex dementia. But that facility will have moving on facilities for people who have been in hospital for a short time or who have been unwell, reabling facilities where therapists will work with the people who come to us to make sure that they can regain their independence, and training facilities for staff. And very much assistive technology will be part of the way that we equip that home. We'll be looking at the ways that we can manage nights better. We'll be looking at the way we can make efficiencies, of course, always a prescient part of working in a public authority. But one of the things that I'm very clear at, and you spoke about the confidence and realism of AI, is in health and social care, a growing serious part of our local economy, as important as any other sector. AI will never replace those lovely human faces and the compassion that people have and really benefit from those who look after them. But they will make, AI can make and is already making the time that carers and health workers spend with people more qualitative, because it gives us a number of things. It gives us the ability to anticipate what's wrong. It gives us the ability to monitor changes and plan care better. And it gives us the opportunity to do small tasks more quickly, like dispensing medication and other things. So that the time spent face to face for some people who don't see anybody else for large parts of the day can be more relaxed. And carers every day make complex decisions. They will walk into a situation and look around, how is the home environment? How is the person they are caring for? Have they eaten? Is there any cleaning that needs doing? What is the temperature like? AI can help us anticipate and understand those things much more quickly than we're able to do without those parts of assistive technology. So
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. Thank you. I want to move on to Kyndi and to talk about its business model. And I'll come to you, Rob. It'd be really good to hear your assessment of how that works in the local healthcare system. But also, it's such an unusual business model. It's a local authority trading company. Can you tell us a bit more about the backstory, what it means in practice, and how does Kyndi play a role between the council and the care teams and the suppliers from a technology point of view?
Yes, certainly. Well, basically, we were a service, as you mentioned, within the local authority, and we were parachuted out into a LATCO, a local authority trading company. Um, we, with regard to our assistive tech arm, we operate almost like a bridge, in my mind, for between health and social care. So we operate out of the acute trust as well as in the community, and we provide the insight and the managed service for Medway Council that enables the social workers and the health, our colleagues in health, to not have to have that in-depth knowledge of what products are out there in the market, because we have that we have that knowledge. We do the horizon scanning, and we can easily run proof of concepts for new and emerging products that we think could help the residents of Medway and that further afield. That enables us to run small proof of concepts. It enables us to self-fund that, to collate the results, so do the whole management, find the cohort of individuals, speak to the family, speak to the individuals, do the installation of the technology, manage the results, monitor the outputs via our 24/7 alarm receiving centre to keep people safe overnight, and then present the findings both to our health colleagues and to our social care colleagues and the commissioners to see if we can then take it to scale. That enables us to, be on hand at the acute trust and at the council headquarters on teams, just to impart the knowledge that we've got. We encourage that social workers come to us with a challenge, not necessarily a solution. One of my clients has a challenge of this. What have you got potentially that could provide some support, and also, which is key for me, the least restrictive level of care? Supporting that person, so as Teresa alluded to, the care can be put in to do the job that the care is meant to do, rather than doing tasks that take up time and take that one-to-one togetherness they have with the carer.
And how big is the organization now within Kyndi? I'm interested in how, what's your scale and how many technologists are part of the team?
So we've got 4 technologists in with Rhiannon, the manager, and we've got another one coming on board shortly. So we are, and we see those guys doing everything. They can do all of our new products. They can do the installation. They'll talk to clients. They'll sit on panels to discuss care packages and where tech can support, and they can deliver the findings.
Yeah, really interesting, and that's a really good bridge actually, because I'll go straight on to asking Rhiannon how she thinks about technology adoption. So you're deploying the technologies in people's homes. What are the steps you go through, and what are the key risks you're needing to manage? And my guess is kind of thinking ahead that people probably worry most about privacy concerns as the tech comes in their house. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremostly, the most important part is the initial assessment. So when we get the referrals, whether it be from the hospital team, in the community, we will go and assess the person with our kit, because not all kit suits everybody. It's got to be person centered. So we'll show them what it is that we've got, help them to have more of an understanding of what it is and how it's going to help. We try to get the family involved, and a lot of the time they do very much so want to be involved with what's going on with their loved ones. So we'll talk everything through with them, get the background of what's going on in their home to try and make it suited to that person.
Yeah, and do you get how much pushback do you get when you go through the process in general? There's no kind of set response? I mean, do you think people people are open to it, or do you think you have to overcome a lot of friction?
There can be friction. I think it's more so of people tend to think that it's taking their independence away from them when it
Yeah.
absolutely isn't. What we're here to do is to try and promote that independence so that they live, a better life in their own home. And we will have as much discussion as we need to try and give them the reassurance that they need in order to do that.
Yeah. So I want to actually go on to talk about one of the portfolio products at Kyndi, and it's only one. It's, if you go and look at the Kyndi website, there's a really interesting range, and I know Rob and Rhiannon and the team are always looking to expand that. But if we zoom in on the product called Circadacare, this is a product where you have smart light bulbs with sensors in people's homes to give carers much richer context about what they get when they come in on periodic visits. And before we jump into questions, we've actually got a really interesting little video just to show you what the product looks like.
I knew he had dementia, having had another family member with it. Once we got the diagnosis, we decided that we were going to live our lives as normal as possible and obviously make adaptations to our lives as the dementia took hold.
The smart bulb is provided by Circadacare. The point of the bulb is to mimic the circadian rhythm of the brain, which is the body's own internal clock to regulate sleep patterns. By the light changing in the bulb, it oscillates throughout a spectrum, so very, very bright in the morning, goes to a dimmer light in the afternoon, so it goes down eventually to a warm glow. This helps regulate people's sleep pattern.
I was offered it by my social worker of Medway Council and said it was a new product and would I like to trial it. So I said, well, I'm quite happy to give anything a go that will benefit Ian. So next thing I knew, Kyndi rang me and said, light bulb. I went, oh yeah, please. And it calms Ian down, but it does me some good as well to relax.
Tallie, I'd like to come to you now. Can you explain the system in broad strokes? What does it sense? What does it infer? What information is it giving to carers? And specifically, where does the AI come in? What is it doing today? And I'm also really interested in the failure modes. How do you manage, we're all worrying with AI when we get a failure. Is it a false positive? Is it a false negative? How do you manage that?
So actually, this is an interesting one because, of course, it's a technology that provides multiple things. It also provides the circadian light, which does not have the AI element behind it, but is a very interesting piece of technology in itself to try and implement in the real world in people's homes. But then there's the AI side of it behind that, which is the insights that we're trying to provide to carers that are more meaningful, perhaps, than they can normally get. The false positives and false negatives thing. I mean, we do. We obviously try to minimize both of them, but if you're looking for a balance, we do move towards the false positives side of the equation. And of course, then you always have to balance that on the other side with, fatigue for alerts and that sort of thing. And so we've made a lot of effort to work closely with stakeholders, the care teams that are actually using the technology to try and understand what is too much, what is too little, when is the information required, what time is the information required, how regularly is the information required, and building that picture up over time with the people who are using the technology has been our best way to tune the models, effectively tune the outputs of the models in that sense. A lot of the stuff that we have in there is logic based, and there's like portions of it, if you like, AI. But at the moment, most of our AI is really around using classification models. But as we get more sophisticated, we're very aware that just understanding false positives and false negatives is not enough, and that people will want to understand where the inference behind that came from. And that's something that we're really interested in pushing forward as time goes on.
Can you give a really concrete, practical example of the AI system working in practice behind the product? So an example where it will infer something and tell the carer something. Practical example that would allow them to make an intervention along the lines of what Teresa indicated earlier.
So, for example, the acoustic sensors on board can classify sounds into things like coughing, snoring, sounds of distress. So, for example, if somebody's coughing, we track the coughing over time. And so we build up a picture of what's normal for that individual. So if somebody has a chronic cough, we're not going to be alerting to say there's a cough. But if that coughing changes, for example, they start coughing a lot more at night than they used to, and what we'd like to do is say that the quality of the cough has changed. It's a wet cough, it used to be a dry cough, that sort of thing. Then we can raise that as an alert. And obviously it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. It's going to be based on a statistical profile of that individual. On top of that, there's other kinds of alerts. For example, that might more be a sort of an email that you get in the morning that says, by the way, this person's coughing profile is changing. And there's also sort of more regular stuff that you can get. You can get the reactive alerts. So if, for example, we had an example of a lady who was calling out in distress. And it turns out that the distressful sounds that she was making, it wasn't shouting for help, it was the sounds that she was making sounded distressful. And so we alerted that there was a massive increase in the stress sounds in this room. And when the carer went through to check, it turns out that this lady had simply dropped the telly remote and she wanted to turn the telly off. But the consequence of that was that she was leaning out the bed, she was trying to get to it herself. Classic situation where you're going to have a fall, possibly a less damaging fall because she's already closer to the floor. But nevertheless, these are the sorts of things that you can mitigate if you can pick up this sort of sound and classify it. But you can't do that with just simple thresholding necessarily.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what I find really interesting about what you just said there is you've obviously got general acoustic modeling or sound models as your starting point, but you're also tuning it based on the individual home and the sound you're hearing, so you can make much more granular and informed decisions.
Yes.
So that's super interesting. I want to move on and just come back to privacy. So, this obviously come up a bit in the conversation already, but how have you designed these systems to be privacy minded while still delivering meaningful input? I mean, I think that's a really interesting balance. And, particularly on the acoustic side, I guess an obvious objection might be, well, yeah, you're listening to me.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is a question for all of you, actually, not just for Tallie, but I'll be interested in any other comments.
Sorry, shall I jump in first, or does anybody else?
Yeah, go ahead. And
well,
the others will
yeah,
comment.
I mean, it is a key issue. It's one of the first issues that came up when we first developed the concept and presented this to members of the public and said, where are your problems? And you get every kind of response, really, from I don't mind having this at all because it would help me live independently, to I won't even have an Alexa in my home. Or the people who say, well, I don't want it listening to me like my Alexa does, but they still have an Alexa in their home. So there's a lot of depth and breadth to how people feel about this. We have made it very privacy minded. The data is classified, and then it's that metadata that's then collated and sent on to anybody. The sound data itself is not sent on to anybody. And of course, we have all of the expected controls that you would expect in there. We have security, we have we encrypt the data, we make sure we do all the things that we should do in transit, at rest, etc. And then on top of that, we have our own auditing controls. So, we have automated auditing on the cloud, so that if anybody, even in our team, accesses data, an email is instantly sent to the top team to ensure that we know that somebody has accessed this data. So I think it's about having, we have all the policies and the controls. It's about following as many of the guidelines, if there isn't specific legislation in place first, to ensure that you can back up the legitimacy of your position, and that you have the documentation to show that to anybody who asks from a B2B perspective. From a selling to a customer perspective, from understanding what the service user has to live with, I think that's very much a trust and education piece that wouldn't work without somebody like Kyndi and their care providers going in there and having exactly what Rhiannon said. We will talk to them as many times as is necessary to help them understand that we're doing something that helps them live the lives that they want to live.
Yeah, and that comes back to key. Yeah, it comes back to Teresa's point about the importance of a human face. I want to just go on to talk about, bring it back to the Kyndi team. So I'll come back to Rob and Rhiannon now. So obviously you're getting these insights. The benefits will only be realized if you initiate action from the trigger. Rob or Rhiannon, once the system flags something as unusual, what happens next? And I want to also pick up on the point that Tallie was making about false positives. How do you avoid alert fatigue or overreaction? How do you communicate uncertainty so people understand there's human judgments involved? All of these sort of people-related things.
Yeah, so I'll let Rhi jump in a bit because she probably has a more in-depth understanding. But from my point of view, looking at it, it's an interpretation of it's acknowledging an interpretation of what the alerts are saying, and then it's in viewing the trend data. So, for example, in my house, you could see potentially at the moment that the temperature would be too low across the property for the working hours when we're not at home. So the initial alerts would come in saying that, but after a while, you would see that the trend in that property would be that it's cold during the day and then warm at night, and then again and again, and therefore you're noting that that is the usual practice, and that's what we're doing with clients. We would use the trend data and we would see whether it's an alert that requires an immediate conversation with the next of kin or with the individual themselves, whether it is a trend data that's showing that after showers then there is a real potential for harmful mold and damp to be formed. So we would then educate that individual and their family to say, okay, when you've had a shower, open the window, create the ventilation, shut the window afterwards. And it's just a question of just picking out the bits, because we know the client, what is important and what isn't. And using that trend data as well for mobility and things like that. So if we see a dip or a change in something that's not been normal for the last couple of weeks, that is a flag, and then we can tell family members or care agencies that potentially you need to go and see and try and mobilize that individual a little bit more. Maybe take them out for a walk or whatever, that sort of scenario. So it's just reading the data, knowing the individual, and making sure that the data that you get is person-led, which comes straight back to the trust issue that you were alluding to right at the beginning.
Yeah. Rhiannon, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it goes back as well to the initial assessment that we do. It's really important to know the person, know their background, know what is the norm for them and what isn't, so that if we are alerted by our assistive tech in any way, then we've got an understanding that there may be a problem and there's something that we do about it. And depending on what assistive tech it is that we have in the property, I mean, some of it means that we do have to go out and see them on a monthly basis, and we're constantly assessing all of the time. So what we've put in at the beginning, it might mean now that they need other bits of assistive tech which will support them also. And I do think that having multiple tech in someone's property, it really does complement each bit of tech.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. Teresa, I want to come back to.
Can I just say one more thing on that?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah,
it's just the it's such an important element, exactly as you said, the human element, and I think it's what makes this so successful is that we are not trying to diagnose or advise or tell somebody the state. We are literally just providing digestible information that then the experts know what to do with, and I think that helps build the trust. Sorry, but I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, that's a very helpful point. Thank you. Teresa, I'd like to come back to you just to talk about where you are in terms of thinking about evidence and impact now. So from your perspective as a counsellor, like, how do you tell that the technologies are making a positive difference? And, what's changed for residents, what's changed in the local care system? And then I guess there's also more general points I'm interested in where, are you at the point where you would be thinking about building new housing that should just be designed to be ready for this technology, like right from the beginning?
If I take the last point you made first, the answer to that is absolutely. We're just in the process now of the inspection of our local plan. And I've been very clear that building lifetime housing that is technology compliant has got to be a critical part of, a percentage of some of the new building that we do, because retrofitting actually is quite expensive. So we want those facilities to be there. And, I think Rhiannon and Rob have spoken about that sharing and communicating with somebody as many times as possible. The language that we use is important. the language of reassurance, not being GDPR loaded when we're talking to people, making sure that we involve families, and normalizing assistive technology, reminding people that a Ring doorbell and a Hive system for the heating are forms of assistive technology that people use every day, and that this is an expansion for keeping somebody who is more vulnerable safer than they otherwise would be. And the involvement of other people in the lives of somebody who is using assistive technology to help them stay independent is critical. We know that people through their phones can join in with some of the things that Tallie and others have been speaking about. So it's getting a very careful balance between surveillance and care. Surveillance is part of care, but it's not often in itself the only thing that we want to do. It's about interpreting things, and it's about sharing the information at a point that we want to make changes. And having those conversations, not just with the recipients of care, but with those who are delivering it and those who are making decisions about it, has been equally important. Kyndi have done a lot with us to talk to our social workforce, because we need assistive technology to be a natural and considered part of a care package when one's being put together.
Yeah.
And to have an honest conversation with recipients, because of course it's not free. It's part of the way that social care is funded, and there are choices around whether people end up deciding that they're going to fund it or not. So we've got to be sensitive to the balance in people's finances against, well, if you're not going to be able to stay independent, what impact would that have on your finances? How does it compare? So there's actually lots of different levels of conversation, and some of those conversations are not being had by technologists and engineers at all. They're being had by social workers.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
start off the process. So this is a very clearly a joint enterprise. And I think I was just having a look at the question in the chat, and certainly, I think what engineers can do, apart from all the other things that they do, is be mindful of what's at the end of the technology.
Yeah, we'll definitely come on to talk
Yeah.
about that when we get to the questions. That's a great question.
Yeah.
This is the bit in the conversation where I always come to talking about what didn't go so well. There's a big purpose of practical AI is to be candid about what didn't work. So I think this is a question for, well, probably Rob, Rhiannon, and Tallie. Can you give like a really concrete example when something went wrong? What did you do to redesign around it? And I'm always interested in the areas where you didn't quite expect it. It came out of the blue. It was something that, as you were rolling out the technology, something unexpected happened.
Go for it, Rob.
Yeah, okay, fine. So mine will be more, I suppose, practical rather than AI based. But we did find that in a few homes we went to, the light fittings wouldn't support the bulb. So by converting our stance and having a chat with us, so we were providing small lamp stands for them to work in. So the little desktop lamps, which we tried, tested, they gave the same level of support, they gave the same outputs. Something that cost £5, we could then do it and put it in there, and it meant that person could enjoy the same level of innovation that somebody who had got the light fit in. So that's one way we needed to adapt going forward.
Yeah, really interesting. Tallie?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's always been a known issue, is that we try to supply for all the standard light fittings, but it's amazing how non-standard that actually is when you get out there in the real world with older properties, with newer properties, and obviously this has been quite difficult technology, engineering-wise, to build. To the electronics, the heat management, everything that's gone into a device that would fit inside a standard light fitting has not been trivial. But now we have done all those learnings. We can have a roadmap moving forward that will solve that problem. It'll just take us a little bit more time. And I'm really pleased that Rob has managed to find the solution that works, because the solution works much better than we would have guessed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that example is hilarious. It doesn't surprise me, because if I look at my house, which I've lived in a long time, I have a tub of like 50 different light bulbs for all the different light fittings in the house, because That's exactly what happens. Rhiannon, is there anything else you want to add to that?
We had to think about internet as well, because not everybody has got internet in their home, but then we also know that they would absolutely reap the benefits from using some kind of assistive technology that would need that. So what we did was we got routers and provided them so that they could still have the tech that they needed.
Yeah, fantastic. I'd like to just maybe come on to what's next. Maybe come to you, Tallie. What are you thinking is the next technical step? What would it unlock? Is there additional AI capability you're thinking of exploring?
Very
What
much.
difference would it make?
Yeah, so I mean, this has been a highly successful venture in terms of proving that this technology can work in the real world and provide fantastic both personal and economic ROI, which is at the end of the day what you need to achieve. But you recognize, I mean, from my background was actually as an academic working in a very specific kind of dementia, frontotemporal dementia, behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia, where the symptoms aren't necessarily like Alzheimer's. And I'm very aware that the dementias, the spectrum of dementias can be highly variable, heterogeneous. The diagnosis profile can change as you move through that, and you don't know how fast it's going to go. And often, if you guess a diagnosis, it might be 6 months or 12 months before your next review at a memory clinic, and a lot can change in that time in many different dimensions, and nobody's really looking at that. And so for us, it's a case of we already have technology that works preventatively to help these people to maintain their independence, that provides useful information for care planning, etc. What we want to do is we want to say, actually, we can understand this nuanced behavior for individuals on for what's normal for them. So not saying as some standard memory feature or some standard behavior that you expect of a particular diagnosis, but just who's this individual? How are they going about their lives? Are they able to continue to live independently? Can you tell that from nuanced behavior? And that's where, for us, the sophisticated AI in our R&D efforts right now are really showing a lot of promise. And so that's something that we're looking to push forward.
When you talk about sophisticated AI, is that you integrating generative AI models, or are you looking at more targeted techniques? What exactly is happening in the R&D that you can talk about?
It's a good question. What can we talk about? So yes, I mean we have indeed looked at. We've been using all sorts of large language models, etc. We've branched out into various tools and techniques available from what's out there on the market in terms of AI. We've done our own. We've done our own transfer learning. We've done our own borrowing other people's materials that are available. So the whole gamut of that's been used. But what was the original question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm just interested in what you're likely to deploy next. So where was this going?
So it's been very much a feasibility test initially, and that's when you go at it full guns, you get everything. But actually, from a cost perspective, from a privacy perspective, are these valid techniques to use? And for us, we're trying to bring it closer to the edge all the time. So it really is about engineering a solution that works in the real world, that follows the spec that people do require privacy. That this has to be secure, and that it can't be too data hungry. But it's obviously it's doing a big job. You're asking it to do a lot of things, and so that just takes time to iterate through. We know it's possible.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come to audience Q&A, but I've got one final question before we do that, and I want to come back to the comment I made at the beginning, and I think Teresa alluded to, which is like we need to think about scaling here. And I'm really interested in your views on how would we be able to take what you've learned in Medway and really scale it. So what would you want regulators or policymakers to understand about this technology to make adoption easier, particularly about the AI pieces? What needs to change more globally for us to be able to scale this kind of intervention?
Interesting that you mentioned regulators, because in fact I was involved in a conversation only yesterday regarding the CQC and the fact that they do not yet make any judgments related about the efficacy or even the use of assistive technology. And it's important that they do, because as we advance along that pathway, then the care that we deliver is shaped by assistive technology. So there's a regulator piece to do. We've already spoken about the implications for building new homes. You know, we will build 29,000 new homes in Medway by 2035, 2040. And those have got to reflect the people who are likely to live in them. And that means that developers have to recognise that demand is upon them and demonstrate not that a development isn't viable if they're being asked to do that, but that in fact it will increase its viability because it's more likely to be responsive to the community. So there are more than one sector who need to be involved and behind the way that we develop, and one of the I've just and Rob was part of it too. I chaired a parliamentary commission with Policy Connect on this recently, and we had builders there, as well as care experience people, care educators, universities, and our local colleges who are producing technology enabled training facilities. So I've just described there a whole spectrum of public services, private enterprise, and different sectors of industry coming together in one room, absolutely coalesced around the importance of assistive technology and the different elements, and very much in that was R&D and the way that research can help us determine some of the things that you were asking about earlier. Well, what is the next step? We've seen with analog technology, like the thing that perhaps people are more familiar with, wearing a lifeline that you press and it goes through to a phone call. We know about 50-60% of those are in a drawer somewhere. We can't afford for new assistive technology to be treated like that. So we have to be prepared to modernize and change. The size is getting smaller. That's important. If people live in a smaller space, they don't want things that are going to take over their living space or change the way that the feel of the things that they want their home to be like. So if there's absolutely an imperative, and the commission showed that, to do things together and to reach into the different elements of people who, long before somebody needs assistive technology, are involved in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think that makes health and social care attractive to people in other disciplines, because they can bring, engineers can, people who've worked in more mechanical environments, people who work in design, they can bring their ideas and their skills to bear on this important area of public and health services. And I think there are people who are attracted to that, because obviously that means that they're using their skills to the sort of human good. And that's another element that I think we need to promote, because we need the workforce to be as diverse as I've just described, as enthusiastic and as capable of making sure that we get the quantum and capacity that we need at the time that we need it.
That's a good segue actually for us to take some of the questions. We've got a few minutes left to do that, and I'll go to a question which I think is really interesting. You alluded to it earlier, but question which is, what do you view as the main engineering and AI bottlenecks for transforming health sensing? And any advice on more urgent and sandbox use cases that the engineering community should build the proof of concept on? And maybe I'll start there with Tallie and Rhiannon. Are there any thoughts on that question?
Do you want to go first, Rhiannon?
It's a really interesting question about how we do sandboxes.
You can go first, Tallie, that's fine.
Yeah, please go. Okay. Do you want me to? Sorry, yeah. Okay. So for me, it's around integrating. The interoperability piece has been one that's been raised by people working for councils and all of the surrounding ecosystem for a long time. It's been a very difficult nut to crack. We've tried very hard from the beginning to be as interoperable as possible, bidirectionally, taking data on board, sending data out. And actually, it's quite difficult to either find willing partners or capable partners to do what could be done with such systems. And from the healthcare side of things, that problem is multiplied many times over. They have a high inertia in their systems. There are so many layers, and of course, no NHS trust is the same. So I think if you have useful data, trying to find the best way to trickle that through the system so that it's safe and received by people who actually want to use it is a very difficult thing to achieve.
There's actually a really interesting follow-on question, which I'm going to come straight to actually, and then I'd like Rhiannon to come in, but it's a question around the metadata. So how do you anticipate using the metadata that, for example, the Circadacare bulb is garnering in other ways? So have you thought about how you would extend that out?
We have in various ways, but I'm not sure of the context actually, and I'd answer more, but
Well, yeah. So lots of thinking. Rhiannon, do you want to come in on that?
I felt the same way as Tallie, to be honest.
yeah.
I think,
I mean,
perhaps I
go
can
on,
help with
Teresa.
that. The metadata will help shape policy and funding.
Yeah.
I'm very keen as a councillor to widen the responsibility for the way that we make policy across everybody who actually delivers it. So when we're looking, we're looking at evidence-based policy making, the metadata will be part of that picture. We'll be making financial and practical decisions based on that kind of data.
Yeah, and there's
And,
obviously huge amounts of data that's been gathered, and it's suitably anonymized. So there's actually a treasure trove of really interesting insight if you can be careful about the way you use it. There's another
I hope
issue.
that, in the longer term, it will also inform design and innovation.
Yeah.
Tallie's already said we don't stand still. The light bulbs themselves have changed in the lifetime of me being the portfolio holder. They look different from when I first saw them in 2023. And that's not least because of the need to make them more flexible and fit lots of different but those changes are happening all the time. The medication dispensers look very different already. So from that very early design and concept stage, I hope that the metadata will be useful. And we've got to be careful how we share it, but if we don't share it, it's just wasted.
Yeah. There's another interesting follow-on question actually, which I think Teresa you alluded to. So there are obviously lots of people beginning to adopt smart home technologies. There's a lot already happening on phones. We have thermostats and we have Ring devices. To what extent are you thinking about using the technologies already present in homes to provide assistive care technology support? I'm sure they can are thinking a lot about this.
I think the way that we join with families who, particularly with the care of younger disabled people who may be coming into adulthood and wanting to be more independent, working with families to think about the way that technology they're already familiar with using can help promote that independence and enable them to let go a bit. So that transition from children's services to adult services for somebody who may have disabilities but want to be in independent living, the reassurance that their parents can get through familiar technology is very important. So that strangers don't come into the property. The vulnerability of the person that they have been caring for who's now living independently isn't exploited by anybody. Those kinds of things, I think, are really important. Controlling the temperature, watching the way that somebody is living so they don't get bills for that they can't cope with very quickly. So people are quite accustomed to doing that, having a video call saying, show me around the room how things are going. I think that the permissibility of that is already there, but it's for us to say, well, actually, this is part of the picture of caring. And alongside all of those things you're already doing that you perhaps haven't realized are so important. Here are other things that are going to help promote the independence of the person that we're collectively standing around to make sure that they can live a good independent life. So in fact, I do see that there, and I'm interested in the way that we can link everyday technology to assistive technology.
Rob, Rhiannon, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in quick, but yeah, definitely when Rhiannon's team, when they go out and do the person-led assessment, as Teresa alluded to there, we go out and we look around to see what existing tech, what smart home tech they've got at the moment, and how maybe it can be repurposed to support them. If they've got an Alexa, for example, then put it on Med reminders. They've got a Ring doorbell, connecting it through to a family member. So, and then collating all that data. So what we're in the process now is trying to get all of that data to come in, which is the halcyon bit, into one place, so that we can then predict a trend for somebody upstream further. So potentially if someone misses a certain type of medication, that potentially could lead to a reduction in mobility, which could lead to a fall. So you're hitting it right that preventative interaction is where you want to be, and linking all of those bits of data into one pot is what we're looking to do at the moment.
Yeah. Rhiannon?
Yeah, agreed with what Rob said, and like I said earlier about tech complementing each other. That seems to happen all of the time with the initial technology that they've got in their properties already, up until what we put in there also, and by gathering all of this information together, it really helps with continuing assessments, helping with social workers in the community to have more of an understanding of what's going on whilst they're not there, because although they do their assessments, which they are very good at doing, they're not there all of the time. So by having this technology in the property in between, it can build a bigger picture and a better understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to come to a final question, I think, which is a much bigger question for all of you. And there's obviously a huge amount of hype out there in the world at the moment about thinking about AI in health or AI in care. And we've had a really sort of concrete, grounded conversation today. But if you wanted to correct a misconception about what people think about AI in care, how would you express that? Like, what would you want to correct when people are talking about it, all the hype in the world at the moment about using these things to improve health and care? What debunking would you do?
I mean, I have said this before on this call, but I would say it again. It is about enhancement, not replacement of humans.
Yeah.
It is about extending the ability of humans to look after one another, and improving their confidence when they have to make judgments, because of the fact that a simple thing, a simple cup that is designed to help monitor the amount of liquid that somebody drinks in a day is a way of making a judgment about how well they are and what else we need to do to keep somebody going. And I don't want people to be fearful of technology. But that element of trust and judgment is for us humans to concentrate on, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a really important piece about that from a human point of view, which is that humans mustn't become lazy about taking everything that they hear from the AI as fact. So we know that to be true as well. So there's that level of sort of engagement and cognitive involvement that's still really important. Tallie, is there anything else you want to say?
Really, John, if I can just say, where we've got technology used for simulation training in health, it's a much safer, more qualitative and evaluative way of training somebody to look after human beings. When you've practiced on a piece of simulation equipment with a mannequin that breathes and looks at you, that is a lot safer than practicing on a real person and getting it wrong. And far from, limiting a kind of bedside manner, hopefully, the person who treats you feels more confident about what they're going to do, because actually not only have they done it before in a simulation setting, but they've been able to evaluate their own performance before they actually start working on you.
Rob, Tallie, Rhiannon, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, go on.
It's really just that trust piece, isn't it? One thing about AI to debunk, it's not there to spy on you when it's done the right way. It's there to provide you with support. And I'll go back to my initial comment. What we're really after is the least restrictive care for this individual and their family to live happier for longer at home. That's what we're in it all for, basically.
Yeah. Tallie?
Yeah, I really want to second what everybody said there. I thought Teresa put it extremely eloquently. And I think there is a lot of mistrust in this sector. And it is, I have to say, we are in a very under-regulated area. Tech itself, technology-enabled care is under-regulated. AI is under-regulated. Even circadian light is under-regulated. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area to do something that you can put out there to say we are trustworthy. And so I think the more that we work with our customers, and the more hopefully they understand that we are genuinely trying to provide a solution that works for everybody, the better, but there's just second to what everybody else has already said, really.
Final word from you, Rhiannon?
Yeah, I think as well, it's very much so, trial and error. It's not, we've got this bit of kit, we'll put it into your home, it's going to work wonders. It may not necessarily work for one person, but it could work for another. And, we're always continuing to look to see what other tech there is out there to support people living independently and, to promote their independence and to give them the reassurance that they need.
Well, thank you. I think we're running out of time now. Before I wrap up, I think we'd love to hear from the audience again. So please use the link in the chat to answer a quick question via Slido at this time. We want to know if your thinking on AI adoption has been influenced at all by the conversation we've had today. And while you're voting, I just want to say a huge thank you to Teresa and Rob and Rhiannon and Tallie for really interesting and stimulating discussion. I've really enjoyed it. And thank everyone joining us online for some good, insightful questions to our panel. Okay, so let's see what's coming through on the a little, somewhat, a lot. So yeah, good mix there. We've made some progress. But I do want to thank you again. If this conversation has sparked your interest, or if you have any further comments about today's event, or you'd like to propose some topics for us to consider, please do respond to the survey that's been posted in the chat. And we'll also email it to you following the event. Your feedback is really helpful. It does help us to shape and improve future events. And stay tuned, because we'll be doing more of this practical AI series. Watch out on our LinkedIn page. And if you missed the first two events, one was about improving road safety with AI-enabled sensors. The second was about embodied AI being used to help inspect infrastructure assets. You can read blogs with the highlights and lessons, or watch the footage, which can be found on the Academy's website. But thank you all for joining us, and I hope to see you at the next event.